Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Rockies Daily. I'm your host, Scott Ayers, where we are talking all things Colorado Rockies. Got a fun one in store today, and we're going to start talking about the last couple of spring training games for the Colorado Rockies. Right now, as I'm recording, they are in about the fifth inning against the Angels, but a lot of the guys that I want to talk about have come and gone in that game, and so want to touch on a couple different things here and talk about that game against Chicago as well. A couple of the different storylines is we've seen some solid outings. Michael Lorenzen just pitched an inning, looked solid. It's hard to get a strong sample size from just an innings pitched. Chase Dollander today against the Angels pitched 2 innings. He just gave up a hit and a walk, but he's also touching nearly 100 miles an hour on that fastball. And so for that recipe of success, it's going to be one, getting ahead in counts, right? In every at-bat for him, for Dollander. But on top of that, that fastball, I mean, that is going to be his moneymaker. And so if he's got something that can hit 100 miles an hour and can be solid with his placement, he's going to be, I think, very good for the Rockies. And so his development is key, and so it's encouraging to see a positive start to the spring for Dollander. You look at some of the hitting now for the Rockies, and you have to walk away feeling pretty good about a good chunk of these guys. Cole Carrig is actually hitting the ball well. At the time of recording this, he's 2 for 2. He's hitting about 500. Kyle Karros is hitting well. Ryan Ritter just knocked in Amador as we speak, excuse me. And so all of these younger guys are hitting the ball well. And we've talked about it, but if they can just even play well enough in the spring to make Warren Schaefer to have difficult decisions of what to do come season start, that is a great position to be in for the Rockies. And it'll kind of go in a little bit to segment 3. But for the Rockies, seeing these younger guys hit well is great. Now, not everything has been perfect. TJ Rumfield, one of the guys competing for the first base position, remains hitless this spring. And he's had a few appearances already. So that is something to monitor. A lot of these guys vying for that first base position have not been hitting the ball well. We still have yet to see Tyler Freeman return. And so these are all just different things to note. Just, kind of log it in the back of your mind. Edward Julian is 1 for 3 currently against the Angels. So first base position will continue to just be interesting to watch to see what the Rockies will decide to do. Obviously, still plenty of time before they have to make that decision. But ultimately interesting overall. You have to be somewhat happy with what you've seen from the bullpen. Halverson did struggle today, though, giving up a couple runs against the Angels. Now, the fun thing was we got to see Zach Veen hit an absolute nuclear missile of a walk-off home run against Chicago. This is the new and revamped Zach Veen. And the dude is for sure getting tested after this game. He's probably going to get tested more than any Rockies player has ever been tested before for PEDs, just because his frame is absolutely bonkers now. Is that me saying I think he has been taking substances? No, I do not think that. But when you see a guy get to the size that he is and just send one to essentially Pluto to walk things off, the league likes to look into that. Now, do I have sources that the league's actually doing that? No. It's more tongue-in-cheek. But for Zach Veen, I think spring and early season is going to be pretty big for him and will be imperative. And these are the kind of things that help build and grow that confidence for Veen and for some of these other younger guys that might have struggled last year. Because it wasn't just Veen. It was a lot of these younger guys who were given opportunities, but it was more of just kind of being thrown into a fire without any sort of fire gear and asked to survive what was that 2025 season. So for Veen, for these guys, to have confidence is is a really big thing, and that's really the focus of today's show. The first two segments, we're just talking about how some of these guys are playing, but ultimately, there is a bit of a concern for the Colorado Rockies, and this isn't anything new. I think if you've followed the Rockies for a while now, if you've watched this show even for a little, we can note that the Rockies are in a very, very interesting situation where one, their on-paper roster doesn't look great. Two, their farm system does not look great. In the past, their ownership has not looked great. They've got a lot of uphill battles that they need to find answers to, and that just becomes more prevalent when we watch some of these other teams, right? You look at Connor Griffin, who's right now the number one prospect in baseball with the Pirates, and is getting comparisons to Mike Trout, the Mike Trout of shortstops. He hit an absolute bomb against the Boston Red Sox in spring training. You look at the guy who's drafted right after Charlie Condon in Nick Kurtz, who offensively looks to be an absolute juggernaut, was great in 2025. And that's not to say Charlie Condon isn't going to be a good baseball player. And it's not to say, hey, this was the wrong pick. But you do have to note those things, right? Like, you do have to know who the contributors are and what did the Rockies do. And so it all goes back to development of the younger guys that we have. Beck, Karros, Tovar, Doyle, Condon, Carrick, Holiday, Dollander, Gordon, Sullivan. I'm just listing a bunch of names right now. Names that have either shown face at the major league level or expected to soon. Zach Veen. These are all guys that the Rockies desperately need to be good. Because one of the other issues is if you have a bunch of young guys that aren't good, one of the advantages of having younger players that have high upside is they also have much more value when it comes to making trades. And it's something we've noted, but if you aren't able to make trades and you aren't able to develop and you aren't making the right draft picks, that's an issue. And these are all things that this new Rockies front office will need to be great in. And this new staff with Brett Pill and Alan Leichman will need to be great in developing these guys. You will need to make a solid roster of what you have and be able to build from that, both through trades, development, and free agency. Free agency will just always be difficult for the Rockies for a couple of different reasons. The first of which is ownership. You look at the top teams here in Major League Baseball. One, they obviously have some crazy TV deals that the Rockies won't be able to match. But two, they have owners that are aggressive and willing to spend. And we just haven't necessarily seen that from the Montforts at times. They did go and sign Chris Bryant, which was very bad. My system just needed a hard reset thinking about that and how that all progressed. But ownership, you need to have solid ownership when it comes to free agency of being willing to spend money. Now, obviously, this past offseason, the Rockies weren't going to spend and throw out cash like they were at the club. That would not make sense. But moving forward, that is going to be something that they have to consider when this team gets better. On top of that, pitchers, it's going to be hard to find pitchers that want to pitch at Coors Field. Michael Lorenzen is a great starting point of a guy who wanted to take on the challenge of Coors Field. Now, what you'll want to do is hopefully you upgrade from a Michael Lorenzen to guys in their mid-20s that are saying, hey, I really like what the Rockies are building. Sign me up. And they have a plan to be successful. Sign me up. I mean, those are just a couple of different things to list. Hitters will be more attainable. Chris Bryant is an option. I wouldn't use that as an example because it is a holy overpay. Just goodness gracious. But they have been successful in signing free agents in the past that can play decently in the field or hit well. But ultimately, the strongest point for the Rockies has always been how they develop and developing from within. But you're going to have to be able to not only be strong in that craft, but be good at the other two things as well. And so that's why stories like Roldy Brito is huge. That's a guy that kind of came out of nowhere and is now seen as a top 100 prospect. And that was due to proper scouting from the Rockies, proper development, and now you have three guys that are listed as top 100 players. It's just a matter of how do you develop Holiday. I've seen random things on my algorithm of people trying to complain about Ethan Holiday. If you have somehow stumbled on that stuff, I would not be worried about Holiday, but it is important for this team to develop these guys. Because having top prospects and developing them is a very big deal for just long-term success. And there's more to than just having one good guy. You have to be able to build a roster. But you get the point of how important this will be for the Rockies to build out this team and the many challenges that they face. And 2026 can be a really solid springboard for that development that we're talking about and for some of the bounce backs for players that frankly have had value drop. And some of those players are Brenton Doyle that we've mentioned that I think will have a strong 26. But you get the point. You get to see what the Rockies are facing, and it gives you an idea of some of the different things that they will need to be successful in, not only in 2026 and beyond. And it feels good to actually have a front office that feels competent, and we will have a better idea of how this front office operates throughout the rest of this season and beyond. And we'll have a better idea of what Brett Pill and Alan Leichman are capable of, as well as Warren Schaefer and his in-game management. But it's less about Schaefer and more about some of these other pieces that we noted on. So just figured it was an interesting topic to talk about now that we see guys actually playing. And it's just been an encouraging early sample size. And I can't stress enough, very small sample size early on, but it's been an encouraging one for some of these younger guys and how they have performed at the plate. So something to note, something to have your eye on as we get closer and closer into the season. And then once that season starts, just, observing what is the front office doing. But I figured we'd end this show to talk about this ABS system, the new strikeout system, and man, it is a good change. If you're not sure what this is, it's a new system being implemented this year. Allows both pitchers and batters to challenge ball and strike calls, and we've gotten some examples of it. There was a pretty blatant call in a game today where it was a pitch essentially over the middle that was called a ball. Pitcher was able to challenge it, called a strike. Essentially how the system works, you get two unsuccessful challenges. So unlike other sports where, hey, your two challenges were good, we'll give you a third and you're done. Not the case for baseball. If you have an ump make 10 straight incorrect calls and you challenge all 10, you're good to keep doing that over and over and over again. It's only if you toss one underhand, it's going into the dirt, and you think it's a strike, and you're screaming at the ump to challenge that puppy, and they say, well, you're an idiot because that was indeed a ball, that would be considered an unsuccessful challenge. So you get two of those. Once you have your second, it is done for the game. But it is good on all accounts. This has been something that's been used in the minor league since 2022. And it really does feel like the beginning of just moving towards just a total automatic robo strike zone. Umps do have certain calls that are necessary and needed, but ultimately there are so many egos behind the plate. There are so many calls that I'm sure if you're watching, you can think of a game where there was a call that felt detrimental one way or the other. And that just shouldn't be the case. Human error is a thing in all sports. When it comes to balls and strikes and with just your objective strike zone, some of these umps are subjective, right? Like, hey, they're more willing to call this type of this part of the plate a strike, or hey, it's a smaller strike zone with this ump. In reality, it should just be consistent across the board. this is a really positive change. It's going to check some egos, but very, very needed. And so just be aware of that come season time. It is, I think, a very good change for Major League Baseball. And that's where we're going to end today's show. A little bit shorter show to get you on your day. But I really appreciate you watching. Please make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, share. Grandma has been dying to learn about the Colorado Rockies, and this is the place for her to learn. And if it isn't Grandma, if it isn't Grandpa, if it's not Mom and Dad, maybe it's just a friend. Regardless, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you on Thursday.